Hello, everyone. In today's episode, we are going to talk about something I believe every adult should have, and that's a comprehensive estate plan. None of us like to think about our own mortality, but today we're going to talk about why it's so important for you to have a current estate plan and the critical things you need to be thinking about. I'm Betty Wang, the host of Betty's Smart Friends. I'm a certified financial planner who helps women feel more empowered and less alone in their financial lives. We're so lucky today to have joining us Amy Danneil Law. She has years of experience as an estate attorney and trusted advisor, guiding her clients through all the intricacies of estate planning. What makes Amy different is not only her legal expertise and experience, but it's her personal and compassionate approach to each and every client. Please welcome Amy Danneil to the show. Hi, Amy. Thanks
Hi,
for joining
Betty.
us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with letting the listeners know a little bit about your background and your journey into estate planning.
Okay, so I am licensed in Colorado. I went to law school at DU, and after law school, I started working in environmental and regulatory law. And then I was pregnant with twins, and I left that job and was at home and up at night feeding those little guys. And one night, my husband said, "We're going to need a will. Can you do that?" And I was thinking, oh my God, like I'm up in 3 in the morning feeding babies, and now you're asking me to like delve into a whole other area of law that I know nothing about. But um, the good news is the boys were good sleepers, and so I had hours of time to myself during the days when they were really tiny. And so I started looking into this, thinking, oh, I'll just, download a will. I've got access to different attorneys that could give me a will to draft and just put it together. But then as I started looking into it, I was realizing that it is just so much more complex than you think. And that was 17 years ago. The boys are 17, so I've been doing this for a long time now. And I just started helping friends and family members put their estates together, and I've just focused on that this whole time. But really, the sticking piece of it is helping people and really being able to make a difference and just it I sleep better at night knowing someone has their estate plan in place. So even when people were at the end of the process and getting people to signing, like every time we get someone sign, I'm always so happy that they have all their ducks in a row, even if it's just one person and one family at a time.
I feel like that too, and my clients have that. And I think they feel the relief. It's nice to have a lot of people know they're supposed to have this. They know that it's part of adulting, but people just put it off because it's really not, nobody likes to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about like what's entailed in a comprehensive estate plan? It's not just a will. What else is involved?
Yeah, like what I learned in, the very beginning is that it's not just the document. Like you're working with a professional when you go have someone else do your estate plan because you're going to them for the advice because do it yourself always results in whatever the do it yourself results are. So um, a comprehensive plan is different from a basic plan. Every single person has an estate, whether you have $20,000 in a bank account and you own your car, that is your estate. You might not think it's very much to speak of, and you might not, know what's going to happen with it or really care because you're feeling like it's not that much. But really, who is going to get your car? Who is going to get your $20,000 bank account? Where is your planning? And so from there all the way to someone who has two homes and a business and 5 kids and all of that whether you own a little or a lot, you have an estate. And so a basic comprehensive estate plan means you didn't just fill out a will and walk away. You had someone look at, okay, what assets do you have, what things do we need to care about, and talk about the dynamics in your family, talk about who your beneficiaries are, how old are they, when do you want them to receive anything, how do you want them to receive anything, who are the players in implementing your plans, like what are the family dynamics between naming a brother or sister of your own as guardian for your kids if you're gone. So thinking about the totality of every piece of what's happening, that's a comprehensive plan. And so you wouldn't know how to do a comprehensive plan. You would know maybe what you want, but or think you know what you want, but a lot of times, you answer one question, then it unfolds a whole bunch of other questions. And so different from a basic estate plan, a comprehensive estate plan is where someone has helped you think through all the critical points of making sure that all those areas that you're not even aware of are touched on and addressed appropriately, from times of disability to guardianship to your assets, and then how everything's going to flow at death.
So who do you think should have one? I mean, do you agree most every adult should have one? Or is that not really,
Yeah.
is that too broad?
I mean, you probably should. Most people should, because you might not think that you need one, but if you're gone and you left your family a huge mess to pick up, they're gonna wish that you had one. And I think one thing that I've started doing the last several years is helping teenagers, 18-year-olds and up, start putting their documents together, because that's the first time in your life where you really need to realize that there's no one to take care of you, and you need to spell out for someone else how you want to be taken care of. So everyone who's 18 needs, at the bare minimum, a medical power of attorney, a HIPAA release, and a general durable power of attorney, so that they can name their parents or their family or friend to make decisions for them when they're disabled or incapacitated, or even if it's for a short time, even if it's just for a car accident or a surgery that you're taking longer to recover from. As soon as you're 18, that's kind of when you need to start thinking, okay, someone else will need to step in if I ever am not able to do things for myself. And so um, getting that legal literacy when we're that age helps so much. If we're 18 and we already have those documents in place, then we're not so, it's not so novel when we're 25 and getting married and thinking, okay, now we need to step it up. And now someone needs to take a more close look at our joint finances and who we're naming as beneficiaries. And so you kind of need one your whole life. It's just stages through your life that you need it. I think if you don't have real property, or if you really do just have like one bank account, you could probably get away with it not being a terrible mess to leave for your people behind.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that the HIPAA laws change how things work. When we all went to college, of
Mhm.
course, our parents got information. Of course, they could visit us in the hospital. But now, once they're 18, these things aren't just given. I had a friend whose brother had a 21-year-old who got in a car accident. The 21-year-old was on her brother's health insurance plan. When the brother went to go visit his son, they wouldn't let him in because the son was still in recovery, and the dad didn't have permission to go see the son or even learn about what was going on. So that was one of those examples that it just really depends on the hospital. They're supposed to be protecting the privacy of the patient. And if the patient is not awake, you need these documents to say, that's my person who's speaking for you.
I know, and that I had a real similar story with a friend whose son was struggling with mental issues, and he tried to take his own life, and
Oh,
he was in
no.
a different state. And my friend got a call in the middle of the night, and a nurse in the hospital knew that he had done this. He was on life support,
Oh
and
my God.
he didn't have any documents, but she found his wallet and figured out how to call his mom. She went across the street to a 7-Eleven and like totally broke hospital protocol, because I'm gonna start crying. She called the other mom and was just like, I have teenager myself, and you should need to know that he's in the hospital. And she totally could have gotten fired for doing that. But my friend
Right.
was like, oh my God. So she was on the first plane to go get to him. And it's just so sad, because it doesn't have to be that tragic. And I mean, that was a tragic story. It turned out fine ultimately. But like, I think there's so many parents, and I would tell people this a lot. For some reason, the most appendectomies, like emergency appendectomies, happen between 18 and 25. The most mental breakdowns happen between 18 and 25. Like, all this tumultuous times that we have during college and post high school is not just because we're going to college, it's because it's that age break and kind of where we are in our world, and it's just big changes. And if there's ever a time you really needed someone to step in for you, it can be during those years.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think you've helped educate me on all the things that we need to be thinking about as our kids get older, or, if you're estranged from your family and you don't want your family speaking for you, or partnered couples who aren't married, um, these are really important places to have, especially the medical power of attorney and financial power of attorney. Is that fair to assume?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you're bringing up the unmarried couples because there are so many of them for so many reasons. People aren't getting married, but they're living together, but they're not really committed to saying we're common law married or not. And so there's this wiggle room of who has priority, and particularly where people aren't close with your partner's family. There's can be a real battle over who's got decision making power, and who, if that person passes away, where does that person's assets go? If you don't have a will in place or some sort of directions in place, like the way Colorado's intestate laws work, and intestate just means you're dying without a will, and um, the statutory scheme takes hold and tells us what your will be if you don't have one. And so that will distribute things maybe to your parents, maybe to your kids if you have them, but definitely not to an unmarried partner unless you've specified that somewhere else. So you have to be real careful that you've gotten all these gaping holes, and they might not even seem gaping. You might be in your world thinking, well, I have my partner and I've got my kids, and that's that. And then if you were to just take your situation to be evaluated by someone, you might be surprised to find that there's lots of places where things aren't actually going where you think they're going.
Yeah, no. And what are some special considerations for, say, like widows that say they are widowed, and what kind of estate planning should they be doing now that they are confronting life on their own without a partner? Are there things that they should be thinking about that's different than, say, the partnered situation that we were just talking about?
I think the widow piece is really hard because a lot of them in grief situations, the focus is on, you know, cleaning everything up, making sure everything's organized, and adjusting to new life, and sort of putting themselves on the back burner while they get through this time. And, they have a plan, they have a will, they kind of know that. And so that they had with their partner, it's just that their partner passed first. And so they just kind of focus on going through the motions and getting through that first year. But really, this is the time where you need to become empowered in so many ways. If you're on your own, whether you're a single person or a widow, you really are focused more on how do I protect myself? Because whether you have kids or not, all of a sudden you don't have that go-to person or that automatic, kind of default person. And you really need to be thinking like, if I'm incapacitated, which friend, which family member, which person is going to be at the hospital with me? It probably should not be your 18-year-old kid. It probably should be, another adult who has some life experience that can help you make good decisions. And so being protective about your body, your person, what you want, because you are no longer having those pillow talk conversations with your partner about what you would or wouldn't want in those situations. So how do your friends or your extended family know what you want? And so that's protecting your body, making sure you update your medical power of attorney, making sure that you have a living will in place. But also, I think I was just speaking about empowerment because this is the time where it can be predatory. Can be
Yes.
predatory where, someone says, okay, you just passed, you inherited a ton of money. Let me help you show you how to invest this better. Or let me show you, it's a real easy change just to, take your husband off your accounts and just name all three kids as beneficiaries, or things like that, which seem like a good idea in the moment. But as you get further and further away from that, if you're involved with a person down the road who is not a good actor, all of a sudden, if you're in an argument with your kids and you decide I'm going to name this new partner as a beneficiary on my retirement account, you just kind of eliminated your kids as being heirs to you on that particular account without fully thinking through um, the consequences of the whole thing. And so that might just be one account, but what if that account, appreciates a ton? I mean, you really need to keep an eye on what your overall plan is, not just one thing at a time. And so widows I see, and single people I see, I try and convince them to do a trust-based plan, because really once you put everything in a trust and you do the heavy lifting of transferring your house into the trust, moving your investment accounts in the trust, and creating a document that really spells out what you want to happen with everything, that work of transferring property or transferring assets into a trust takes time. It also means they have to talk with someone like me. It also means they have to talk to someone like you. And so the ability to make good decisions is really supported by your network of people instead of you just doing things, on your own. And then if you're partnered with someone who is saying, you probably should just put me as your beneficiary, or a caregiver who's like, I'm the only one taking care of you these days. Notice that your kids aren't home. You should put me on that account. If you've put everything into a trust, it takes a lot more work to undo what you did. And so the ability for someone to influence you and make decisions is a lot harder. And that's how you're being protective of yourself and your assets and your plans, because in a moment where you were calm and thinking about things and getting, professional advice from your financial advisor or your attorney, you are getting the comprehensive planning that you need instead of, making kind of fleet decisions based on an emotion or a certain situation without having the whole thing evaluated. And so I try and, have people, particularly when, but certainly single men too, like you want
Yeah.
to make sure that everything's accounted for in the way that you mean to. And the trust planning, I mean, we can get into that a little bit, but the trust planning helps so much because um, if you're single now, you have your medical power of attorney maybe reestablished, you have your living will maybe reestablished, but who's going to handle your money and your assets if you're incapacitated? A general durable power of attorney document can do that for you. But a lot of times the banks say things like, oh, well, you didn't use our internal form, or, this document's 3 years old, or prove to us that the person you're here to help is actually incapacitated. They just make it really, really hard to use that. But when your assets have been put into a trust, whoever is you've named as your successor trustee or your co-trustee is already a known quantity at the bank, already a known quantity with your financial advisor and the financial institutions. And so if you are injured, that person can just step in, take over for you for as long as you need them to. And it's, just such a more fluid transfer of power on your assets. So when we're single and you don't have that partner anymore, it's, having a plan in place that really can be a support to you with your network of professional advisors, but also just knowing that you put a plan in place that is totally comprehensive of everything that you're supposed to be concerned about now makes a big, big difference.
Well, I think a lot of folks, especially folks, single people, will say, oh, I thought trusts were for the uber rich or for people who have a lot of assets. But you're saying that it's probably more beneficial to to single people just because of all these things that you just explained.
Yeah, I think it's just more protective all around. And then, I mean, for all single people, I tell them to get a prenup before they move on to,
I
to
do
be
too.
with,
I
be with
agree.
anybody else. The good news is that once you put all your stuff in a trust, you can't just add someone on as a joint owner without it disrupting the whole plan. And so you're kind of forcing your own hand and your future partner by saying, we have to do this a certain way, and my assets are set aside for me and for my kids, and yes, I want to provide for you too, but let's figure out how that works mathematically. Let's go talk with the attorney, let's go talk with the financial advisor and balance this out so we don't accidentally, disinherit each other's kids
Yeah.
when
Well,
we're
that happens.
I know.
You and I have both heard um, not so great stories about these things happen. People forget to update their will when they break up or get divorced, forget to update their beneficiaries, and that turns into kids, grandkids being disinherited. And it's a really sad situation when you know that wasn't the intent of the deceased.
I know. Yeah, I tell this one story about I think, of the bad stories, one that I was able to rescue was I had this woman client, her husband, she was probably 70. Her husband had died 10 years before she came in to see me. She brought in her oldest son with her and said, my husband died. I need to update my will. And what do I need to do? And so from the document itself, the document said, if my husband's gone, I want her son to be the personal representative, but she had four kids, not just this one son. And she wanted all of her assets split up four ways. And so that meant whatever the house was, whatever the investments were, she wanted it all to go four ways. But after her husband died, she went with the son to take her husband's name off the bank account. And she had a couple $100,000 in this bank account. And the banker said, hey, if you just, put your son here's name on there, you can avoid probate and then it'll just go to him and you won't have to worry about it. Well, that all sounded great to her. But when she told me that at this meeting, I'm like, there's no way you would know that in her will because her will says she wants everything to go four ways. But what she had done by putting her only son's name on that bank account as the transfer on death beneficiary is that he was going to get it all. And and he was a good kid, he was an adult,
Yeah.
even if he would have split it equally amongst his brothers and sisters, that just instantaneously creates this, why did mom leave this for you? And why are you different? What were you trying to do? Were you influencing mom? Why didn't mom love us all the same? Like all those questions, when she totally was just following what this random banker was telling her to do. And so, thank God she came in and he was horrified. He's like, oh my God, his brother and two sisters would have been so mad. And so we cleaned it up. But it's that kind of stuff where if you're not paying attention to all the different things that comprise your estate, all the counts, all the assets, and making sure each one ties in the way that you really want your plan to go, then you're at risk for it falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, what's your opinion on that? I've not only bankers, but AARP has told its readers that they should be adding their son, their daughter to their bank account as joint holders or as transfer on death. I mean, I think that I always, of course, defer to the state attorney. I don't practice law, but it from certain tax pieces, it sounds a little hairy. What are your thoughts?
Same. I mean, especially because the AARP or whoever is saying this doesn't know if the reader that they're writing to has an estate plan in place. Because if you have an estate plan in place and you have your comprehensive review of everything, then you just take words out of this magazine periodical that you got and go make these changes. You just totally undermined your entire plan. And that's why we do reviews every few years to make sure we haven't had any like crazy changes like this. But your point is correct. Like it changes tax wise what happens. The other thing from a legal standpoint is if you are 60 years old and you have $100,000 in a bank and you follow that instruction to add your son on as a joint owner, which here's the pluses. If he's a joint owner, he can sign for you. He can have access to the money and make payments on behalf of you. He could handle all the bills for you. And when you die, it becomes his. So those are the reasons why you might want to do that. But the reason you wouldn't want to do that is because if you have other kids to worry about, it looks like it's just your son's money when you pass away. And then he might have gift taxing problems if he's trying to then re-gift out his sibling shares. But probably the biggest piece legally is that if he gets into a car accident and is sued, he owns that and it could wipe out that $100,000 in an instant. And then there goes your account just because he was a joint owner. So you're subjecting whoever you're on joint accounts with, you're subjected to each other's liabilities. And so that joint ownership is best between husbands and wives and partners. And then pretty much nobody else. Unless, unless, depending on the circumstances, but you should go talk to someone about whether that ownership is right or not.
Amen. I agree. So that brings up the question of, I mean, some people are like, well, I have my estate plan. I'm all set. But when I'm reviewing it, it's 10 years old, and there's been laws, significant laws that change, tax laws in particular, that change how things are passed down. What is your recommendation for how often people should be reviewing their estate plans
I think you
or
should keep
having
it.
somebody?
Yeah, I think you should keep it on your desk. I don't think you should put it in a safe deposit box or keep it arm's distance from you. I think if you're in an accident or something, you're going to want your spouse or whoever it is to be able to grab your medical power of attorney and your HIPAA release and let living will and get to the hospital. So don't make it hard to get to. But the point of that is if it's sitting on your desk, you're more likely to look at it once a year and just say, like, who are the people? Who did I name? Did someone I name, end up actually getting divorced this year? Or actually, who is a trusted person that, I think is maybe making some choices I don't want them making anymore. Maybe I need to shift them. So looking at it once a year helps. In my practice, once I help someone sign their documents, I just put a note in my calendar to contact them 3 years later. And so I will always reach out every 3 years and make sure that we get a review on the calendar to just look through the documents again. So they don't have to look at it once a year. But anytime there's life changes, like buying a house, buying more property, selling assets, adding a baby in, and oftentimes it's just something happening with your extended family or friends that you've named to be key personnel in your plan. Like someone else is incapacitated or someone else has moved or someone else is dealing with a sick child or sick somebody in their family and wouldn't have the capacity to be a guardian or be a trustee for your kids anymore. So every few years for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have a financial advisor, I offer this, but we have a vault, a secure vault. So, and I tell clients that if you're at the hospital and you need something, I can send it to you immediately, or you can get to it if you have web access. And the other piece is it's on my tickler to review every 3 years just to say, hey, have you reached out to your estate attorney to look at this? Because there are some very old estate plans out there that your kids are older now, or your situation's different, the things that you've been saying. Or now with these inherited IRA rules, the taxability of that, and we don't need to go into that, but there are definitely changes that have happened in the last 5 years that can can really throw a wrench into people's what they think it's done, and it's not.
Yes, that's exactly right. I see it myself. So
What do you recommend for as we're getting older? Our kids are not only getting older, but our parents are getting older. What have you been saying in terms of planning for parents, people with elderly parents that they may care for or help financially?
it goes back to being protective of them in a couple different ways. So I mean, our parents, I don't know, I'm sure yours are like mine. They don't want to talk about their
Right.
money situation. All a big secret.
Yep.
So, um, but is there enough money there if they needed to be on long-term care? And if there isn't, and then there's a chance that they might need to be supported by Medicaid, do we want to do planning ahead of time to remove assets from their ownership so that, down the road they could make themselves eligible for Medicaid so that in a nursing home situation doesn't create a poverty situation for them. Also making sure that all of those medical powers of attorney, general powers of attorney are up to date so that their adult kids can step in and handle everything for them. And this is where trust planning, again, helps so much because if you've done all the legwork of putting your property and everything into a trust and you are still the trustee, but you've named your adult kids who you love and trust to manage everything for you, then truly, and I had a client do this a couple of years ago. She found out she had cancer. She was gonna pass. She did pass, but the 6 weeks before were so easy because she was just like, I'm just gonna pass the reins over to my son. He is now the trustee. He handles everything. And then when she passed, there was no hoopla. It was just he was doing the same role that he was doing for the last 6 weeks for her. And he was able to distribute everything to his brother and sister really quickly. There wasn't a court process, there wasn't a probate. It was just really nice and convenient. And so he could handle things while she was ill. He could handle things immediately after she passed because he was the successor trustee. And it just was not, it was a big deal to me because it was so not a big deal to him. And I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see that play out the way that it is. That's how it should play out.
Well, people don't realize what a mess it is, and how much bureaucracy you have to go through if there's no, I mean, there's bureaucracy no matter what. I mean, even if you have everything buttoned up, but if it's not buttoned up and there's every financial institution has their own way, as you
Yeah.
said, and their own opinion on how things should go. And they all call things, they have different names for the
I
same
know.
things, and that
So
can be
confusing.
so frustrating. So it's not an honor to be somebody's personal representative. It is, or executor. It's really it's a lot of work. So I tell clients, if you're not going to do the estate plan for yourself, do it for a loved one, because they're the people who are going to be, no matter what, they're going to have to get through it, right? If you can make it easier or harder on them. Uh,
Yeah, I was just thinking of a client that he was an only child and he's our age and his parents died within 6 months of each other, and they had one iPad, and he was not a Mac person, and that iPad had every picture of him as the only child from his entire childhood and his adulthood. Like that's where they kept all his pictures. But I had done the parents' planning, and so everything went directly to each other and directly to him, and the probate wasn't needed, which was nice. But then when he tried to get into the Mac or the iPad, he couldn't get in because he didn't have access because he didn't have their digital password. He didn't wasn't able to get in. So he contacted Apple and they told him he needed to go through probate to get a court authority to get into this iPad that he was the one that uploaded the pictures to. But he's like, whatever, I don't need these pictures. And he's like, I'm not spending, $4,000 in probate to get my childhood pictures. And as a mom, I was like, oh my God, your
yes.
own mom would be horrified. But that was his choice. And I was so frustrated because his parent, I told him, do your digital assets, make sure he has access to everything, so he can get into them and into your accounts and do things. And that was the one thing that they really, kind of let loose, and it was such a bummer. I think he was fine with. I think I was more upset about it than he was.
Yeah, as moms, we're
Yeah.
a little more sentimental about these things
Yes.
and pictures of our kids. What other common mistakes do you see or holes in people's plans when they come to you?
Um, I
I
think
mean,
really
other than the big one than not having
right.
anything.
Let's not have it. Um, I think the biggest thing is people feel like doing an estate plan means they have to have a certain amount of money and that they're not anywhere close to dying soon. And the reality is, like, humans have 100% death rate. Like, we're not escaping this. So yes, you will need that plan someday. But what's happening to you before that day could be a perfectly happy, healthy life. Um, but if there's any sort of disability in there, I mean, you could be in a skiing accident in 2 weeks. You could get, hit by a car. So many things happen that we just don't, we really don't know what's happening the next day. We really don't. And um, I think the saddest stories are when someone has not done the disability planning, like
Yep.
done all the life insurance, they've all done they have a will or they've TOD'd or POD'd their accounts, but they have not done anything for themselves in terms of what happens if I lose my autonomy? Like, if I'm not able to use my legs anymore and I can't speak for some reason, who's going to help me? Who's going to take care of me? How will I communicate what my wishes are? And who's going to be fighting over what they want? Because I know my parents will fight for me, but what if my spouse wants to do something else for me? Like that's the kind of stuff where a court does have to intervene if people are at odds with each other and there's no instructions. And so this is the type of thing that just destroys families and pulls everybody apart because everyone's trying to do what they think is right for the person that they all love so much, but no one can find the commonality. And meanwhile, the person that's been injured and isn't able to communicate for themselves or do anything for themselves is the person that really, it's kind of their fault. They left them a mess that their whole family has to deal with and involve the court system and deplete their assets and their well-being for them. Um, it's just really sad. So I think the main thing is just making sure that you aren't just thinking about dying and you're thinking about all the things that happen in between.
Well, I think that's really important, right? Like some people think the estate or comprehensive estate planning is just about the money, but it's really not. It's about if you're incapacitated and if you die, and it's about the money, and it's about your care, and it's about maintaining not only what you want, but also sort of giving directions to people so that they don't have to guess. Because you're right, like families might have different opinions, loved
Yeah.
ones, and that can get, when it comes to your care, they're doing it out of the best interest for you, but then they're going to start fighting with each other, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, and that goes back to the protective piece that I was touching on when we were talking about widows and single people. We should include widowers too.
Yes.
But but the thing is, we're busy thinking. I have a lot of clients that are like, we've had kids, now we need to do this planning, or we're you know remiss for not having done it because we have kids because we know they need a guardian. You know who needs a guardian is yourself. Because if something happens, who do you want to take care of you? And this is where those battles come up because if you haven't stated that if I'm in a terrible incapacitated situation, this is the person, then it could be a judge just deciding that someone else is going to be one caretaker is better for you than another caretaker. And it's the same as you're picking your own guardians for your children. If you don't name a guardian for your children, your brother-in-law that you can't stand that's worth $1 million and can hire all the legal teams he wants because he looks fabulous on paper and you don't like him, or he's married to your sister, you don't like either of them and you don't want them being around the kids, they present to a court like the obvious choice. Meanwhile, your brother, who's super close with your kids and is a great uncle to them, has been down on his luck and doesn't have a great job and doesn't have great credit. Those are the types of things that the court's looking at when they're making determinations of who would be guardian for your kids. And so your kids need a guardian, you need to name a guardian. It's all about being protective and, like you're saying, just making sure that you're not leaving anybody with a mess.
What do you tell people who are super hesitant or intimidated about discussing an estate plan? I mean, because we know that there's a lot of people out there that it's
Yeah.
overwhelming, they don't want to think about it. Um,
Tell them it's like going to the gym. You'll feel better after you did it, no matter what. I know I definitely feel for that. And I think after doing this work for so long, for me, it might look transactional, like, oh, I'm just used to putting these plans together for people because I've seen a lot of things. But I really, really understand not wanting to be there, not wanting to sit and talk about dying. So I did get a compliment a few years ago from he happened to be an anesthesiologist, so it meant a lot. But he's told me that my process was casual and painless. Like, I should make a t-shirt about that. But I don't know. I try and just let people talk through their concerns and talk to each other, talk to me. I mean, it's conversational like this. Like, okay, you bring up this topic. Have you thought about these 6 things? And then that takes us off on another tangent. But just having it be a conversation where you can actually have answers instead of Googling and trying to read what the answer should be, because at the end of every single one of the articles you'll find on Google, it says something like, please talk to an estate attorney about your situation. And you can just skip all that and go talk to someone about it and get your answers right away. And I think you just start feeling better and feeling more empowered the same way they do when they visit you, like they might not want to go talk about their finances, but when they go sit and then they kind of feel like, oh, we're kind of put together and we're organized and we've got Betty on our side. I think people just feel better when they have the help instead of trying to figure it out on their own.
I agree. Now, how can listeners find you? What's the best way to contact you if they're interested in learning more?
Email's great, phone's great. My website is daniellawpc.com. My last name's spelled strange, and we blame my husband, so it's DANNEILLAWPC.com. But I'm in the Denver area. I work in Colorado, and I'd love to hear from anybody. If you have questions or thoughts or concerns, I'm happy to answer them.
And what about listeners who aren't in Colorado? How do you recommend they find someone like you with, I mean, I would say, again, it's your personal, not only your legal expertise, but it's this personal, warm approach that you have that I think my clients in particular, really enjoy. Um, and find it painless and and
Casual.
casual. Um, what do you recommend if they're in the market for somebody and they're not in Colorado? Are there
So
sites?
I don't know about the site. I mean, I don't know because I
Yeah.
just actually
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that question. But I would start with your friends, like find out who had a good experience with somebody else. Talk with your financial advisor. Your financial advisors typically know several estate planning attorneys. Word of mouth, just like everything else, seems to be the way to go. And when you're meeting with someone, you want to know what their fees are going to be up front, and you want to know, what's included in your plan, and make sure you're getting all the documents included, because even though it's not about the documents, you still want to be walking away with everything. Out of state people, I guess that's one thing that as you probably experience this too. It's like once you start engaging professionals to help you do things that you don't know how to do or don't want to do yourself, you kind of are exposed to this network. So my clients, it's fun because they'll be like, all right, my daughter's getting married. She needs a prenup. Who do you recommend? And then I can recommend my favorite family law attorney that I love working with in Denver. And so it's whether it's an employment issue or a divorce issue, once you start bringing those professionals into your world, you kind of have a little bit of access to other highly recommended professionals that you might not need now, but now if you've done your estate plan, you've done your financial plan, you kind of have access to other people. And so that's a little carrot for getting people to do their work too.
Yeah, no, that is true. And so my closing question to all guests is how do you maintain your own personal balance and peace when you're obviously doing this good work, you have a family. What do you do to maintain your balance and peace?
Um, I like exercising. I like yoga. I love listening to a podcast and working on a puzzle. And so that's kind of my relax mode when I'm have some free time. So I ski and just try and spend a lot of time with those 17-year-olds who are almost out the door soon. And good thing I have a 14-year-old also. So it's all
Spread
going
out a little, yes.
all going so fast. But yeah, just trying to be present with them and do all my other activities so that I'm out there taking care of myself for them. And
Yeah. And what sort of hobbies or interests do you have? I'm asking this question because a lot of the studies show that in retirement, if you have a particular passion or hobby, that you're much happier. I mean, it sounds like you already have kind of a wider range of hobbies, but is there anything that when you retire or any of these hobbies that you're like, oh, I think I'll spend more time doing that when I retire?
my number one thing I want to get better at when I retire is taking care of plants. I really want to understand
I
them.
kill them too.
Well, I shouldn't kill them. I grow other things really well. And like I pay attention, but I just can't read them. And I feel like I don't know. There's a book called The Secret Life of Plants, and I want to read that and then become a better plant mom.
Oh,
And so that's a goal. Hopefully I'll do that before I retire, but we'll see. Skiing, we'll keep skiing, keep yogiing, keep reading, keep puzzling. Um, I don't know, traveling. I love traveling.
yeah. Do you do the same puzzle over and over? Or once you're done, you're done. Any trade?
I trade.
Yeah.
Once I'm done, I'm done. So I've tried doing them a couple times. We were
I
trapped in the,
don't think I would like that.
I
I'm
know.
done too. I just was curious.
No, we were trapped in the mountains last year when there was that big snowstorm that closed the highways. We were there for 5 days and we only had one puzzle, and so we did it 3 times. I was like, please burn this box. It ever again. So yeah, I don't do it more than once at all.
Yeah, pray to a good home.
Yeah. So,
Well, thank you so much for sharing all your great knowledge and tips. I really appreciate it.
it's fun talking with you. Thank you for having me. It's so fun.